Hello, and welcome to the Aegex Technologies webinar, How to Leverage Digital Technologies in Your Hazardous Location. As more companies explore deploying digital technologies in their industrial organizations such as oil and gas, energy, pharmaceuticals, chemical, or mining, with the goals in mind such as advancing plant safety, increasing efficiency, and improving productivity, they find that it takes more than just picking some equipment. In this webinar, our Aegex digital mobilization expert, Eric Ruckert, will explore the 5 things you need to deploy and support mobile computing in hazardous environments. But before we get rolling, here's a little bit of housekeeping. We will be recording this session, and that will be available after the broadcast. We may have some time for questions at the end, so please queue up your questions in the Questions tab in the control panel. If we don't get to them, we will reach out to you directly. Today's presenter is Eric Ruckert. Eric is a senior sales engineer for Aegex. He educates customers on deploying intrinsically safe mobile computing devices into their hazardous location operations where combustible materials are present. Eric also has ample experience running a manufacturing line, so he knows how to deal with the machines that need to be retooled, recalibrated, and integrated, and how all of that impacts serial production. Prior to coming to work for Aegex, he was working for a SCADA provider to scope and deliver integrated solutions that were regulated by high security environments such as NERC, FERC, and SIP. Eric, let me move to our first question. Let's start with what's driving the need for extending digital technologies in hazardous locations.
Yeah, thank you, Kathleen, and thank you everybody in attendance today. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules to be a part of this. For me, the short answer is data, more specifically what that data enables companies to do. While all companies are different, business units have different drivers, I've actually had providing a list of 5 of the primary, drivers behind why companies are moving to digital transformation. The first is keeping up with the Joneses. The reality is your competition's out there, they've already started this and they're gaining competitive advantages. The great crew change, and if you're not familiar with that, we'll talk a little bit now and then get into it further later. But there's a massive knowledge and skills gap that's being left by the large-scale retirement of industrial workers. Bridging the gap, because of this gap, workers are being asked to do more with less, and the only way they can effectively bridge that gap is with new technology. The 4th item is because now companies can. The full solution set of technologies wasn't in place and proven 3 to 5 years ago. And then finally, the company's bottom line. Companies that are deploying new digital technologies and receiving a modest 2 to 4% increase in operational efficiencies are seeing a yield of millions of dollars per year, year over year.
So why now? I mean, mobile's not new. We've been talking about cloud for a while. What's happening that's causing this to be a big deal right now, Eric?
Yeah, why now versus 3 to 5 years ago? It's really about the evolution of newer convergent technologies. 3 to 5 years ago, many of these technologies didn't exist, or at least not in their current form, and certainly didn't exist in hazardous locations. One of the initial technologies is the consumerization of IT with smart mobile devices, and that led to greater mobility, BYOD, or bring your own device policies, and the wide-scale familiarity with tools that hadn't previously existed. Software and applications have evolved with mobility to create a tremendous ecosystem of partners to meet the growing demand to capture more data accurately and in real time. The network infrastructure speed and connectivity were not pervasive enough to take full advantage of all the benefits of mobility, even a few years ago. Cloud migration and adoption has allowed IT to scale at a level never before seen, while reducing the cost for physical hardware and support and removing many of the data connection barriers that existed. And then finally, big data, BI, business intelligence, business analytics, and artificial intelligence are all combining together to make that data consumable and actionable by the enterprise. And now they're fully integrated, not only fully integrated, but providing the capabilities for predictive analytics. This is an ecosystem where none of these components reaches their full benefit without the other.
So a lot going on. You know, we mentioned at the start of this that going digital starts with picking the right equipment. And you just mentioned a lot of other factors that seem like they're going to become important in this decision process. So what is the right process for deciding whether this should be laptops, tablets, phones, rugged handhelds, or some other type of mobile devices? What are some of those considerations, Eric?
Sure, and you know, I guess what I'm conveying here is based on my experience with the customers and the journeys that they've gone through. You know, there's three components that typically get expressed. There's safety and zone requirements. There's intrinsic safety versus explosion proof and the certifications around those. And then the form factor and function. And all of this leads up to the device that ultimately supports the applications later. So in regards to safety and zone, in an environment, in order for an environment to be considered explosive, you need three elements. You need oxygen, you need a fuel source, something that's combustible, and an ignition source or energy. The explosive atmosphere is actually defined by the certifying bodies based on the number of hours per year that environment is present. If you remove any of those elements, that environment is no longer explosive. Now, some organizations have taken this a step further. Some organizations have taken this a step further, where they've actually defined Zone 2 environments as Zone 1 because they contain both a Zone 1 and Zone 2. Now, this is precautionary due to the what if. What if somebody accidentally walks into a Zone 1 area with a Zone 2 device? Or what if there's a gas leak that we're not aware of and it becomes a Zone 1 area? The next thing I want to talk about is the difference between intrinsic safety and explosion proof. And there's two methods for protecting mobile equipment going into hazardous environments. The first and the most common method is encapsulating or enclosing a device, in which case you take more of a commercial grade device that contains a higher amount of energy than is allowed in that environment, and enclosing or encapsulating it. The second method, and the method that Aegex has chosen, is to design something to be intrinsically safe. And what that means is that there's not enough potential energy on the device to potentially cause an explosion in a hazardous environment. So even if the device is compromised, the safety remains intact. Now, once you've determined the safety requirements, you can look at the form factor and function. And the three primary mobile devices that we see or that our customers are looking at are radios, handhelds, and tablets. You know, the radios provide good two-way communication, but they're really limited to just audio communication. And so if you need more functionality, you need video, you need to be able to access applications or information, you need either a handheld or a tablet. And the handhelds are a smaller form factor, allow for some basic data usage, but you're going to be limited on the amount of back-of-house interface that you can have and document access. And then finally, the tablets, which are a larger form factor, and most are lightweight or relatively lightweight and portable. This allows the full access to the suite of software, applications, technical documentation running across the enterprise. So in addition to the safety and form factor, there are a couple other physical considerations, and this is really dependent on how the operators are going to be using the devices. You know, does a 6-inch display work, or will they need an 8 or 10-inch? If you're looking at a Windows operating system, 10-inch and above is really the optimal space for viewing the Windows OS. How long are the shifts? Is it longer than 8 hours? Will the device be able to cover a shift more than 8 hours, or will it require recharging or an additional hot swappable battery, if you will? What is the OS? You know, the Windows allows you to take your desktop into hazardous locations, and because it is the enterprise solution is the default for most organizations. And then tablet versus phone. You know, the tablet gives you more functionality versus, you know, or it gives you access to the full office environment in your hands.
Yeah, and you mentioned, the tie in between the form factor and the applications, and then, Windows 10 being such a standard, but, there are a lot of purpose-built applications now also available, say, through the Aegex application partner network, right? So you can really have something like work order processing or something very specific to that industrial application that you'd want to be able to carry around on something probably a more robust form factor than just a phone, right?
Yeah, correct. And for people that are either just starting their digital journey or relatively new to it, I would invite them to go to our website, look at the technology partners that we have that we're presenting applications for, understand what's already out there, what's already integrated with the Aegex tablet, and as well as look at the use cases that we have. So you're not essentially reinventing the wheel here. You've got some ground to start on.
Awesome. Well, let's shift gears here a little bit and talk about the people side of it. Over the past several decades, and you alluded to this in the beginning, Eric, the energy industry has gone through a significant demographic shift. There's even a name for this that you mentioned it, the Great Crew Change. So tell us about this demographic change and how might the technology that we're talking about help deal with that?
Yeah, so and this is a little near and dear to my heart because I'm closer to the retirement age than I am the digital natives. I don't want to give my age away, but I knew going into doing research on this that this existed. Our channels talked to us about it, our customers have talked to us about it, but I didn't know that there was an actual term for this. And it was an article in the Houston Chronicle a couple of years ago that talks about the large retirement or the large exodus of the skilled laborers in oil and gas, to the point, and this shocked me, quite honestly, more than a third of the workers, which represents tens of thousands in the U.S. or in the U.S. oil industry, will retire in the next 5 to 10 years. That's going to leave a huge knowledge and skills gap. Nobody can hire fast enough to fill those positions, and the people certainly won't be trained up quickly enough to fill that gap. The recruiting class are digital natives, the people that have grown up with mobile technology, and they don't want paper. They come into, recently they've gone into some of these environments that are laden with paper, and they scratch their heads and go, well, where's the technology? So to bridge the gap, what we see companies doing now in their move towards mobility in the hazardous environment, they're using applications to automate a lot of the processes and streamline workflow. Any repetitive activities that can be captured digitally and turned into a automated process or being fed into these applications. Now, the intangible benefit that's coming from this is that now these digital natives are looking to these companies that have been more paper-centric, that are adopting technology and are more open to coming to work for these organizations. You know, the more technologically advanced companies out there are going to be able to capture the best and brightest minds.
Yeah, an interesting challenge. Since we're talking about people, the people side of this, let's talk a little bit about IT and OT and that relationship. Normally, IT directs the rollout and supports new technologies, but in these industrial environments over the past few years, operations technology or OT teams determine a lot of the data and technology and application needs of the operations personnel on the ground. So, you know, traditionally I've been hearing that these two realms don't necessarily see eye to eye. How do you see IT and OT coming together to drive these sort of initiatives together? Do you have some thoughts on that, Eric?
I do. It's not quite the Hatfields and McCoys, but you know, if we're being honest, these two departments in the past have not played nice in the sandbox. They operated independently. There wasn't a lot of need for interaction between the two. In fact, industry termed the relationship the forced convergence of IT and OT. With the growth and benefit of technologies, digital technology specifically, there's no longer a choice to work together. And senior management is bringing people together, either in some cases forcefully or as teams to begin to bridge this gap. There's three things that I think can help with this, and this may be an oversimplification, but you know, reaching across the aisle, people are people, and you know, whether you're in IT or OT, you know, you have different responsibilities, but you're really not that different. Work together to define some common objectives. You know, don't boil the ocean. Go find something that overlaps between your two departments and define the objectives and start team building from there. And then finally, build off the enterprise operating systems to streamline the deployments, manage data, secure the networks and communication. This takes a lot of resources off of IT and a lot of frustration off of OT.
So, you know, you mentioned a couple of the stakeholders here. So from that perspective, you know, how do you bring together the rest of your stakeholders, and what are some of the key points to consider when you're developing your implementation plan? Once you've picked all your equipment, thought about your applications, how do you get rolling with getting this deployed?
Yeah, so you know, a customer once told me their goal is to fail fast, fail forward, and fail inexpensively. And you know, the idea being learn from your mistakes. This isn't going to be a perfect process out of the gate. Making a digital transformation takes 2 to 4 years to implement, and it can't start until you deploy new technologies. So, you know, part of the question is, if not now, when? You know, make sure that your value proposition or problem you're solving for is clearly defined and measurable. Identify the resources available to you for testing and deployment. Understand that this won't be done in a vacuum, but rather in parallel with daily operations. And use a scientific method: hypothesis, test, change, retest, and conclusion. I believe all these things put together with the previous information will help to ensure a successful digital transformation.
Yeah, definitely. This is sort of the beginning of a really interesting journey as this opportunity arises to really transform this industry. And so if you have questions, you know, you want to learn more about the applications, talk to some of our technology partners, or if you have questions specifically, you know, please do reach out to the sales team, sales@aegex.com, reach out to your reps, your distributors, and get the thought process going to set about this transformation, providing the efficiency and productivity for the new generation in oil and gas and energy in these industries we've been talking about. Thank you so much for your time today, Eric. You've given us so much to think about. We do have a few minutes left. If anybody does have a question that we can answer here online, do type that in your question panel. I know one of the questions that I had seen flash up on the screen earlier, Eric, was when you were talking about use cases. Do you have a couple of examples of use cases where this is being used today?
Yeah, some of the more commonly known use cases would be with companies like OSI. OSI is a SCADA provider and is, recognized as a best-in-class SCADA provider across oil and gas and a number of other vertical industries. And OSI is pulling real-time data back from the field, whether it's telemetry or IoT data, back from the field into their engines, if you will, and taking that data and doing predictive analytics on it, looking at historical trends. And then, alternatively, you have Aviva, who does essentially 3D rendering in hazardous locations. So all the piping, the valves, and so forth, you can visualize the plant as it's being built, and then the as built when it's completed. And through their application, you actually can see the flow and the design of the overall pipe network, if you will.
Awesome. Well, those were really great examples to give us some more information on that. I know I'd seen some questions regarding roadmap and timing. We'll answer those offline so we can get you the specific answer to your questions on that. If there's any other questions, let me just check that real quick. Okay. All right. Well, at that point, I didn't see anything further come into our queue. So thank you again, audience. Thank you, Eric, for your time today. And if you have anything that we can answer directly, please reach out and connect with us.
Thank you, Kathleen. Appreciate it.